I've seen some crazy things in my nearly 10,000 hours of live poker experience, but three hands in particular stand out as absolutely the most insane hands I've ever witnessed. Check out these jaw-dropping hands and leave a note in the comments which of these was your favorite and whether you've seen or been a part of a hand even crazier than these. So coming in at number 3, we have the old snap call with 4 high. How could a hand like this even happen? Well, apparently it can at Encore Casino. I was in a 5-10 game where the middle position player opened with pocket 4s, the big blind called, and when we get a 6-6-5 rainbow board, this is looking like a very routine hand. The big blind checks, the middle position player bets, say 1/3 pot, big blind calls with his pocket 2s, and we're on to a turn. Things looking pretty normal still as we get a turn 3, the big blind checks, and now the middle position player sizes up a little bit, betting 1/2. And with the pair and the gutter ball, the big blind continues to call. River is the money card. We get the 5. It doesn't really matter what the suit is. It counterfeits both pairs. And now we have a $245 pot. The big blind knows that he's now been counterfeited, knows that the only way that he can win the hand is to bluff, so decides to lead $250 into the middle position player. And the middle position player snap calls as if he knew the big blind was bluffing, but he didn't realize his own hand had been counterfeited to just 4 high. Even if the big blind was bluffing with like a hand like 7-8 offsuit, he'd still be winning with his 8 high. Nevertheless, the big blind looks at the middle position player like, are you kidding me? What just happened? And the middle position player doesn't even look like he did anything special. He's just kind of like routinely nodding, accepting in the pot, doesn't realize he just made, the hero call of the year, unbeknownst to him. And then somebody told him, your pair was counterfeited. He then realizes that what he thought was, calling down with 3 pair was actually calling down with 4 high. Realize he just made the hero call of his life. So coming in at hand number 2, we have James Bond-like action. We have a royal flush beating a straight flush. Welcome to Twin River 1020, where the craziest hands happen. These are not RNG-induced hands. We have actual insane action at this place. So similarly, the middle position player, like in the last hand, now opens. He goes to 60, and we get a call this time from the small blind. Both players have clubs. Middle position player has ace of clubs, 6 of clubs. Small blind, 8 of clubs, 9 of clubs. These are 2 players I know very well. Great guys, and had a great laugh at this hand. So the flop comes 10 of clubs, jack of clubs, queen of clubs. So naturally, we already have a flopped nut flush versus a flopped straight flush. The small blind checks, the middle position bets 1/3, bets 50, and small blind makes the call. Turn is a brick, and small blind now check calls 150 from the middle position player. Big pot is starting to brew. Middle position, of course, looking to get all the money in with his nut flush. And small blind, of course, isn't going anywhere. A little surprised that we haven't seen a raise yet from the small blind. If a raise occurred here, stacks would almost certainly get in and we'd see an enormous pot. But small blind is playing it a little bit cagey. And we're going to realize why soon. So the river is the king of clubs. Small blind checks, and middle position now bets 450 into 540. Now, I would have expected to see a little bit of thought on the small blind's part here, but the small blind snap folds, apparently putting the middle position player on the ace of, the flush suit the entire hand, and actually didn't realize that he had a straight flush himself. He snap folds the hand face up. Another player at the table yells, "What are you doing? You have a straight flush." And then the small blind then realizes he actually did have a straight flush. He wasn't even thinking in those terms. He was thinking, just that he had a 9-9 flush and now he's beat by the ace. And at the same time, middle position goes through an entire whirlwind of reactions. At first, he looks at the hand that the small blind has folded in complete disbelief, thinking that he bluffed the small blind off the better hand, which was the straight flush, not realizing he had the royal and was beating the small blind. So both players in a 10-20 game did not know what their holdings were. This was set up to be a James Bond-like collision. Instead, we get this little puny pot like nothing has happened. I don't know what to blame this on. Let's blame the dim lights of Twin River. Let's blame the players sitting too far apart. Let's blame some alcohol involved. I don't know what led to this hand, but it was absolutely one of the craziest hands I've ever seen, and it comes in at number 2. Coming in at number 1, and this is a hand that I don't think will be replicated in any poker room ever in the rest of mankind. This is a hand where a player jams into an exposed royal flush. Let that sink in for a second. How does this hand ever happen? Well, player opens in a 2-5 game at the beautiful Chasers poker room. He has queen of hearts, jack of hearts, and we get a call from the big blind. Flop is the king of hearts, 10 of hearts, and 7 of clubs. Pretty excellent draw for the under the gun player. It checks to him, he bets 20, and the big blind calls. This is where the hand goes off the rails. So the under the gun player doesn't realize that the big blind had called. Again, maybe it's the dim lighting at Chasers at this one random table. Maybe it's the fact they were sitting all the way across the table from each other. But the under the gun player thought that the big blind had folded, and he turns over his cards to show the table how strong his draw was. Well, the big blind's still in the hand. His money's still in there. His cards are still in front of them. So what do we do? We have to call the floor over. The floor rules that the hand can go on, but the under the gun player's hand must remain face up throughout the rest of the hand. It's craziest ruling, but here we are playing with an exposed royal flush draw for everyone there to see. Okay, hand goes on, there's roughly 80 bucks in the pot. Turn is the ace of hearts, completing the royal for the under the gun player. Well, the under the gun player knows he can't bet his hand, right? Like absolutely nothing's going to call. He decides to just check his hand after the big blind checks to him, and we go to a river. It's everybody at the table is expecting this to, of course, just be checked down, right? Like how can an exposed royal flush get any action? The big blind's not going to call with anything worse, and the under the gun player can't make a bet and get called by anything else. Well, that's not how it plays out. We get a blank river. We get like the deuce of spades, and in that moment, the big blind decides to jam his remaining $250 into the middle. The rest of the table sits there completely stunned as the under the gun player snap calls this bet. And the big blind then looks across the table and realizes he did not read the board correctly. He saw that the player had just, queen high, or he just looked across the board and said, what is it that you just called me with? You have queen high? Oh, wait a second. So he realizes that his bluff was not going to work, and he realizes the extent of what he did. The rest of the table just loses it. Like everybody's wondering, like, what just happened? They were trying to hold it all together to not influence the action throughout the hand, but now just laughter bursts out. It's one of the craziest moments. The under the gun player sits there absolutely stunned, accepting his money. And then the big blind, this is the part where you feel bad. He just clearly misread the board, felt mortified, felt embarrassed that this had happened. And in that moment, decided to call it a session, was not coming back from this type of, a demoralizing beat, getting stacked by an exposed royal flush. There's really no coming back from that on any one given day. And actually, it turned out there was no coming back from it, period. We never saw this player at Chasers Casino ever again after this hand. So one of the craziest hands I've ever witnessed, definitely coming in at my number 1. I don't really know what to put in front of it. Maybe one of you has a hand crazier than this. If so, please share it in the comments, and please express which of these 3 was your favorite. Let's get a great discussion going. Thank you so much for listening. And if you like this content, please subscribe for more videos just like this.